Greetings everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Lex Imperialis is out, so that means we can finally create a build for Solomorne. I had a great time going through the game with him, and I'm really excited to review some of his mechanics. Now, keep in mind a couple of things. First and foremost, Hellcat is sometimes a little funny when it comes to the build for party members during the time period before the game actually releases. So the version of his build that you all get, hopefully it's going to be the same as mine, but last time for Void Shadows, there were definitely differences, and it might be the same situation here. So if it's drastically different, let me know and I'll cut another video, but hopefully for the most part, it is the same. Also, keep in mind that Solomorne is set up in a way where you don't actually have to focus on shotguns. You could instead focus more on shields if you wanted to, but I think the shotgun build is by far more powerful, and so that's why I'm doing it here. But there's absolutely flexibility in his design. Now, of course, I did drop a slew of videos yesterday, 3 in fact, one for a review of the expansion, another one where we went over all of the mechanics for Arbitrator, and then a third video going over all the mechanics for Overseer. So if any of that interests you, there will be links down below in the description. Go ahead and check out that content. Also, if you haven't purchased Rogue Trader yet, there is a link down below for you to be able to do that. I get a small percentage off of that, so I would definitely appreciate all the support. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the build. So before we get into his archetypes, we got to talk a little bit about the way Solomorne is set up. So for his home world, he does have Imperial World, and that means he's going to be able to take a +10 bonus in one characteristic. His particular characteristic is toughness, so he's got a little bit more wounds than a character like him would usually have. And then when it comes to origin, of course, he has taken Arbitrator, and more specifically, he is the Vigilant subclass. So that is going to focus him more on shotguns. Specifically, he's going to get Swift Justice, which means that anytime enemies are attacked by him or his familiar, which of course is his cybernetic dog Glado, that enemy is going to suffer the Swift Justice effect until the start of his next turn. The shotgun attacks are going to deal additional damage to those enemies that scales with his coercion bonus. So coercion for all arbitrators, but especially vigilance, is a very, very big deal. It's going to assist you in doing more damage, and he's definitely the type of character who his first attack is going to be very powerful, but it's really that second, third, or fourth attack where he can really lay down punishment on powerful bosses. Now, you're also going to get a shotgun attack called Fulminating Shot, and this is going to reduce the dodge, parry, and block of all targets in the area of effect by an amount that again scales with your coercion bonus, and it's going to do this for 1 round. But the key thing to note is that it's going to do this regardless of whether or not the attack is successful. So all that needs to happen is that the enemy was in the area of effect, and all of a sudden they're going to be debuffed. Obviously, this is very, very powerful against bosses and other enemies that are hard to hit. Now, all of that are things that you can have access to if you picked up Arbitrator, but there is one talent Solomorne has that you can't get. It's unique to him, and this is called Torrent of Fury. Every time his dog Glado is damaged, Solomorne is going to get 1 stack of Fury. And then if he selects this ability, he is going to get 5 times that number of stacks as a percentage bonus to his critical hit chance, damage dealt, and dodge reduction. Obviously, this could be very, very important, but just keep in mind, once again, this is about instances where Glado suffers damage, not how much damage Glado suffers. So there might be plenty of times where Glado gets one-shotted and you're only going to get a +1 stack of this effect. So it could be powerful, but in most battles, it's just going to be a small nudge that you can enable in order to get a little bit of an extra boost. All right, now that we went through all of that, let's go ahead and get into the actual build. So his first archetype is Soldier. That obviously obviously focuses on range damage, so it's perfect for a shotgun build, and it's going to give him run and gun, which when it's enabled gives him a small boost in movement points that scales with his agility bonus. But even more importantly, it allows him to do another attack, and that attack costs 1 action point less than it usually would. So this is all about allowing him to pump out more damage. Now once he enables this, he's going to become winded, which is going to place a -10 penalty on ballistic skill, and it also prevents him from using run and gun, but there's a way around that. We'll talk about it in a bit. Next up, he's going to take a +10 bonus in demolition. This is actually very important, but we'll talk about why in a little bit later. All right, next up is revel in slaughter. Now when he enables this, he's going to get a +10 bonus to ballistic skill, a +15% bonus to critical damage, and a +5% bonus to critical hit chance. And actually those last two bonuses both scale with his agility bonus. So the higher your agility is, the more powerful revel in slaughter is going to be. Now you have to kill at least 3 enemies to get the ability in order to be able to use this, but almost just as important as the bonuses it provides, revel in slaughter is going to remove the winded effect, which is going to allow you to do run and gun again. So this is a great way to keep a chain going and just pump out a ton of damage against enemies. Next up is firearm mastery. Now this is going to allow you to make a number of extra attacks equal to your weapon's rate of fire. Obviously this ability is incredible with Argenta when she's using bolters that have that massive rate of fire, but Solomorne is going to be using shotguns, which means he only gets 2 extra attacks from this ability, but those are 2 extra devastating shotgun attacks. So at the end of the day, firearm mastery is still fantastic. And keep in mind that the first attack done with this ability and against each new enemy is automatically going to score a critical hit, and it will automatically reload your weapon. As you'll see in a bit, he does not take the soldier talent that allows him to reload for free, so that actually becomes a little bit of an issue later on in the game. And this is another way where firearm mastery can be useful, allowing him to reload his primary weapon. All right, after that we start getting into the talents that soldier provides. The first one he takes is rack and ruin. After he deals damage to 3 different enemies, he's going to gain a boost of damage that scales with his ballistic skill bonus for the next attack in that combat. Of course, using shotguns, you're constantly firing in a cone that is going to house multiple enemies, so he's going to trigger this all the time. Definitely a great option. Next up, he takes a +5 bonus in ballistic skill. Of course, that's going to be very helpful for anybody using shotguns, so this is great stuff. Then after that, he takes demolition engineer. Now what this allows him to do is use demolition instead of intelligence to determine how much additional damage he's going to deal when using ranged area attacks. Absolutely essential for a shotgun build, and it means the more demolition you have, the more damage you're going to be able to dish out. So definitely demolition is a skill that you're going to want to focus on. Now next, he's going to take another +5 bonus in ballistic skill, and then he's going to take grizzly adjudication. Now this is a shotgun attack that has additional armor penetration equal to whatever your shotgun's armor penetration is. So you see here, he gets an additional 11% currently from this particular talent. And then in addition to that, it's going to inflict levels of bleed that scale with whatever your shotgun's maximum damage is. So obviously this is a great option to use against heavily armored opponents or bosses who you kind of want to bleed them out because you can't take them straight up with damage. Definitely a nice option to have. Next up, he's going to take a +5 bonus in agility, and we've already seen multiple skills and talents that scale off of agility, so obviously this is a great choice that makes him more powerful. After that, he's also going to take lawful intervention, and this is going to allow him to parry attacks using his ranged weapon, and almost as important, it allows him to make attacks of opportunity with his ranged weapon against enemies who are in melee range. This is absolutely essential because the arbitrator gets a ton of ways to trigger attacks of opportunity, and you're absolutely going to be able to take full advantage of that. Next up is Second Skin, and this ensures that while wearing medium armor, Solomorne's dodge is not reduced. This obviously makes him more tanky. There are plenty of fantastic medium armor options in this game, so great stuff. Next up, he gets his first firearm mastery upgrade, and he's going to take the third one. Until the end of combat, all the soldiers' attacks are 20% harder to dodge, and until the end of combat, the soldiers' ranged attacks gain 10% armor penetration. Definitely great with his shotgun build. And then next up is Point Blank. All of his area attacks are going to gain additional armor penetration that scales with his ballistic skill bonus, which should be high, and it's going to ignore an amount of deflection that scales with its ballistic skill bonus when it's used against enemies in a 3-cell radius around the soldier. The vast majority of enemies you shoot are going to be within that range, so absolutely this is something you want to pick up. Next, he takes another +5 bonus to agility, and then he's going to take concentrated fire. The next ranged area attack made by him is going to deal additional damage that scales with its ballistic skill bonus, but is going to be at least 50% plus damage, so a massive boost, and it's going to have an additional amount of dodge reduction that again scales with his ballistic skill bonus. Absolutely, if you're using ranged area attacks, this is an ability you're going to want to have. Great pickup for him once again. Then next up, he's going to take a +10 bonus in coercion, and we already spoke about how the damage that you can deal to enemies you've already hit is going to scale with coercion, so this is another great pickup. Next, he's going to take a +5 increase in perception. Now this is interesting. Solomorne benefits a lot from perception. He also benefits a lot from willpower, so you could honestly go in either direction. I'm absolutely not mad about this at all. Next up is armor piercing. Now his successful attacks are going to reduce the armor of the enemy by 1 round for an amount that scales with his perception bonus. So this is at minimum going to be 10%. Very, very nice, and so it's great to have. Next up is camaraderie. For each adjacent ally, the soldier is going to deal additional damage to enemies that scales with his ballistic skill bonus. And keep in mind, the dog and any familiar really counts as an ally, so it should be very, very easy to ensure that you constantly trigger this additional damage. Great stuff. Next up is prepared prosecution. During the tactical phase, the arbitrator can be placed in a cell adjacent to an enemy. This is actually a monster talent right now, especially because it's bugged. So currently, if you place Solomorne next to an enemy during the tactical phase, he will automatically take an attack of opportunity against the enemy who's next to him, which obviously is not supposed to happen. That'll probably be fixed in another week or so take advantage of it while you can. But even once it does get fixed, there are ways to automatically trigger a willpower resistance test on enemies. Especially your familiars will be able to do this, and you're going to see later on we're going to get a talent that anytime an enemy fails a willpower test in front of you, they automatically trigger an attack of opportunity. So you can basically set it up where not only do you take attacks of opportunity right at the start of combat, but also anytime one of your party members forces an enemy to do this, it's going to trigger another attack of opportunity all over again. And so this causes those abilities, which would usually just be debuffs, to also basically double as attacks. Extremely powerful, very, very fun to use. You definitely want this. Next up, Pillar of the Law. After the arbitrator uses a heroic act or desperate measure, they gain a bonus to coercion that scales with their willpower bonus, and a bonus to block that scales with their willpower bonus as well, until the end of combat. To be honest with you, I'm not crazy about this, at least this early. There's several other talents that I feel like are more important to take than this, but again, coercion helps you in multiple ways, so taking a +16 bonus to it is not necessarily bad. And next up, speaking of which, they take another +10 bonus to coercion, and then finally you get another firearm mastery upgrade. Until the end of your turn, each of your area attacks deals additional damage equal to the number of attack targets. Obviously, that's going to be massively powerful for someone who's using shotguns. You could have 3, 4, 5, even 6 enemies all in range for your shotgun blast. Great stuff. And that is everything that Solomorne has for soldier. As you can see, it's not bad. There's a couple of things I would have done differently, but it's definitely not a situation where I'm like, wow, who thought of this? This is absolute trash. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to overseer. But before we do that, I need to break down a little bit about how familiars work. So his familiar for overseer is Glado, the cyber mastiff, or the dog. Now, all familiars have key characteristics, and in Glado's case, he has weapon skill and strength as the characteristics he cares the most about. They are automatically going to increase as Solomorne's level increases. So Glado doesn't level up the way Solomorne does. He's just going to get stronger and stronger as Solomorne gets stronger. Now, in addition to this, Glado has bestial reflexes, which ensures he never triggers attacks of opportunity. So you don't have to be concerned about that when you're sending him running around. In addition, he's going to get a bonus to armor that scales with his strength rating, and he's going to get a bonus to deflection that scales with his weapon skill, and he's going to get a 20% bonus to his dodge. Now keep in mind that all familiars are prevented from taking extra turns, right? So if you're using someone who has the swarm and they're giving an extra turn to someone in that area of effect, it's not going to extrapolate towards a familiar. There's got to be another full party member in that area of effect available if that's what you want to do. And then familiars also do not suffer injuries or traumas. And so you'll notice I really don't take any talents that revolve around protecting Glado or making him more tanky, because if he goes down, you just spend a few action points and you bring him back up. It's not the biggest deal in the world. So I think your points are much better spent in other places. And then finally, he does also get flanking maneuver, which ensures that his attacks ignore the target's block. So just like you now have access to shields and can block attacks, you're going to run into enemies who have shields and can block attacks, but Glado is going to be immune to that defensive measure. Now, in addition to all this, I do want to call out he has a slot where you can find items that can be put here to give him an increase to his key characteristics and increase his damage. And it always provides some measure of functionality, changes what he can do in some way. So there's a vendor in Dargonis who sells all of these, and as your profit factor grows, you're going to be able to get more powerful versions of them. Definitely be on the lookout for that. If you've talked to the vendor once, then anytime you're on your ship, you can speak to the main guy. I forgot what his name is, but the same guy you can use to access all the other vendors, you can use to access this vendor. It's just a different dialogue option that you have to select, but you definitely want to make sure you're keeping track of that as your profit factor grows to make sure you're aware when some really cool options come about. So now that you know that general information, there are some abilities that Solomorne automatically gets access to because he has the Cyber Mastiff. So the first one is reactivate, and this allows him to bring Glado back when it's unconscious, and he can bring back the familiar of any other overseers in combat as long as the overseer is still conscious. If the overseer is unconscious and their familiar goes down, then that's it. But it can be advantageous to have multiple overseers on the same team, because that means somebody else can do the work to get Glado back up, and Solomorne can use his action points strictly for just firing his shotgun. And then another ability you automatically get is apprehend. So this allows you to choose an enemy in your line of sight, and then Glado is going to use all of his movement points to try to reach that enemy. If he is successful, then he's automatically going to get a free attack against the enemy that's going to deal 50% more damage, and he's going to inflict the apprehended effect. Now, if an enemy is apprehended, if it tries to move away from Glado, he is going to try to stop their movement, and he's going to get an increase to the percentage chance that he'll be able to do that scales with his weapon skill and his strength. If the enemy is able to get away, then Glado will follow that enemy for 0 movement points, and when they get to whatever square they're going to, he's going to then be able to do another free attack against it. So apprehended is basically a great way to lock down a foe, and you'll see there are some other things that kind of rope into it that make make it a very useful skill to have. Keep in mind that while you can use this multiple times in the same turn, it progressively costs more to be able to use it until you get to the next round. Next up is Protect. Now, this allows the Overseer to choose an ally in their line of sight, or they could choose themselves, and then Glado will run over to that character and attack an enemy if it's adjacent to you. Then it'll also make you protected. Now, if you're protected, that means anytime an enemy attacks you, Glado will automatically get a free attack. And he can move around you to any adjacent tile to attack that enemy if need be. If the protected character moves, Glado automatically moves with them for 0 movement points. So it's basically a great way to not only give yourself a little bit more protection, but even more importantly, to keep Glado with you at all times, so you benefit from having an ally directly adjacent to you. And then the final ability you automatically get is Battle Mode Standby. So this just allows the dog to fight autonomously. So if you don't want to have to manually use those action points or figure out what you want the dog to do, you could just let it operate basically as a totally separate party member who will move on its own and attack on its own. Keep in mind, this is going to make the dog significantly weaker because it'll always only move once and it'll only attack once. Whereas when you're manually controlling them, you can have them apprehend or bite an enemy multiple times. So the dog might attack 3, 4, 5 times in one turn when you're using it manually, as opposed to this where it's automatically only going to attack once. All right, now that I've walked you through those basic mechanics, let's go ahead and look at what specifically he's taken for Overseer. So of course he has Cybermassive proficiency, and then next up, the ability that he's taken, or rather the first ability he's taken, is Run. For 1 round, the Cybermassive is going to move through enemies without triggering attacks of opportunity, which is irrelevant for the dog. It already does this, but while moving is going to inflict levels of bleeding that scales with its weapon skill bonus on all adjacent enemies it passes. In addition, for every affected enemy, it's going to increase the dog's critical hit chance for its next attack by a percentage amount that scales with its strength bonus. To be honest with you, neither one of these are all that impressive to me, because it can be difficult to try to set up a situation where the dog is going to run past multiple enemies. However, what I do really like is that this ability removes immobilized, prone, and stunned from the Cybermassive. There were definitely multiple situations where my dog was knocked prone and I had no good way to bring it back up, and it was very, very annoying. So this is absolutely an ability to consider, but personally, I would have taken Bite first or Advanced Tracking, both of which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Now, the first talent taken is Resistance is Futile. Enemies in a 3-cell radius around the familiar suffer a -5 penalty to characteristics considered to be the familiar's key characteristics, which of course are strength and weapon skill. Personally, I don't care for this because a -5 penalty doesn't have to have an impact. You have to have at least a -10 penalty to guarantee that you're going to pull down the characteristic bonus for those enemies. -5 could be impactful. It could mean nothing. I prefer to take talents that I'm sure this is going to have an impact, so I skip this. Now, next up is Overcharge. All of the familiars under Overseer get overcharged as their heroic act, and this first section is the same for all of them, while they get something unique for this second section. Now, what all of them get is that if you use Overcharge, the familiar is going to immediately heal to full wounds, and your next 3 Overseer abilities are going to cost 1 action point less. Most Overseer abilities only cost 1 action point, so it basically gives you 3 free casts. The only one that might potentially cost more is Apprehended if you've already used it in this round. Now, what's unique to the Cybermassive is that until the end of combat, it's going to deal additional damage equal to a percentage of the target's maximum wounds that scales with its weapon skill bonus. This could be a massive increase in damage against bosses and enemies with high health pools. So it's definitely something to consider, but honestly, Firearm mastery is almost always going to be a better option than picking this up. All right, next up, he gets an increase in action points. And then we get to the part of the build I'm not a big fan of. They take multiple increases of fellowship, and obviously that helps with coercion. But in my opinion, especially at this point in the game where enemies are starting to get much tougher, what you really want to ensure is that Solomorne can stay on his feet. And in order to stay on his feet, he needs more dodge. So to me, he should be focusing on agility at this point and making sure his dodge is as high as possible so that when he's standing in the midst of all these enemies, he doesn't get absolutely shredded. That's not what they chose to focus on, so it just is what it is. Starts with a bonus in fellowship, and then next up they took perimeter defense. If protect is used on the overseer, the cyber master's movement points is double when moving to them. This is actually a monster talent. Absolutely monster, but we'll talk about that more in just a bit. Next up, they took yet another +5 bonus in fellowship, and then afterwards they took advanced tracking. Each cell traversed by the cyber mastiff increases its damage dealt by an amount that scales with your weapon skill bonus. This stacks and lasts until your next turn. So this, in combination with doubling movement points when using protect, gives you the opportunity to set the dog up to deal massive damage. You see a way out of the way enemy like a sniper, you run out there, you use protect on yourself, and the dog will have double the movement in order to get to you. But before you do that, you turn on advanced tracking so that all that movement translates into extra damage. And then either the dog will reach you and automatically attack the adjacent enemy, or you can use another ability like apprehend or bite to force the dog to attack it, and it's going to have all that extra damage when it does it. Very powerful, very nice combo when you can get it pulled off. Next up, it takes a +10 bonus in coercion. Again, I don't like this. What you want to focus on, because the coercion is nice, but demolition directly impacts all of your area attack damage. Coercion really comes into play after you have shot an enemy for the first time. So definitely demolition is where you should be focusing on, and agility would help with demolition as well. So this seems kind of backwards. All right, the next talent is cohesion. The familiar gains 50% dodge against the overseer's attacks. I'm not mad at this, but I will say that even with Solomorne having this, Glado gets shredded anytime he's in your shotgun's area of effect, period. Like, I barely recognize this as being on. So it is it is nice, the idea of Glado dodging more of those shotgun attacks and being able to stay up more often, but from what I saw, this doesn't really do anything. The shotgun blasts are just way too powerful. He's not going to be able to dodge them even with this. Next up, yet another +5 bonus to fellowship. This doesn't make sense to me, but hey, it is what it is. And then finally, another talent that honestly I wish they hadn't taken, defensive maneuver. Whenever the wielder successfully uses shield bash, they regain 2 movement points. If they move, they will not provoke attacks of opportunity from the target until the end of their turn. I have no problems with them setting up Solomorne so that he's useful whether you want to go the shield or the shotgun route, but defensive maneuver isn't all that great. it's just not particularly good. And so even if you wanted to, make him more useful for those people focusing on shields, I feel like there were better options to be able to do that. All right, that is the end of everything in Solomorne's build that you cannot impact. That is the way that he comes to you. Obviously, as I mentioned before, I feel like there are some drawbacks to it, but on the whole, the build is pretty solid, and he's definitely good enough where you can make a great shotgun character out of him, even though I think you could do a little bit better if you made one for yourself. With all that being said, let's go ahead and start getting into the talents that I would take. First up, as I mentioned before, I think he's kind of squishy because he hasn't put enough emphasis on dodge. So the first thing I take is side by side. When he and his dog are adjacent to each other, both of them reroll failed dodge attempts once per attack. This is a great way to help ensure that he's going to be more tanky. Next, you can increase the characteristic, and no question, you should focus on agility, get more dodge, and then for skills, you should be focusing on demolition. Now, next up, you can choose an upgrade to the overcharge special ability. I'm going to say here, you could do whatever you want because, and again, in my mind, there's never a time where it makes more sense to choose overcharge over firearm mastery. All right, next up, you have the opportunity to take another overseer talent, but I'd actually recommend skipping over that and instead taking public sentencing. What this is going to allow you to do is take an attack of opportunity anytime an enemy fails a willpower resistance test in front of you. Again, you want to be triggering as many attacks of opportunity as possible, so this is great stuff. You're also going to be able to take a common talent, and again, you want to get that dodge up, so go ahead and take nimble. Next up, you can take another ability, and I would take double slug. Now, what this allows you to do is to use your shotgun to make an attack that deals 2 single shots against the target. This is very, very helpful when you're dealing with an enemy that's surrounded by your party members. You don't want to deal that full cone blast and obliterate your own team. So single shots allows you to still do very good damage, but not in that wide area of effect. Now, keep in mind, these shots are going to have a large amount of over penetration. So it's still possible you're going to hit your ally that's directly behind the enemy that you're shooting. But again, you're not going to hit 4 or 5 of your damn team all at the same time. Circling back to overseer talents, go ahead and pick up Rite of Calibration. The first use of an overseer ability in combat costs 1 action point less. Once again, that usually is going to mean that it's free. And the first turn in combat really oftentimes decides the whole fight, so you want as much action points as you can get right up front, and this is going to help you with that. Next, you're going to be able to choose a common talent, so go ahead and get Law and Order. This is going to allow the attacks that you made on other people's turns to deal more damage that scales with your willpower bonus. Now, your willpower bonus isn't going to be particularly high, but at minimum, this is going to allow you to deal 10% more damage during those attacks of opportunity. Definitely nice. And in addition to that, you're going to force enemies to pass a willpower resistance test, and if they fail, they'll become immobilized for 1 round. Shotguns have a very limited range, so being able to immobilize enemies and ensure they stay right in front of you is absolutely very helpful. All right, next up, you've maxed out all the increases you could do on agility, so go ahead and move over to ballistic skill. And you've also maxed out demolition, so go ahead and move over to coercion. For your next overseer talent, I would recommend you go ahead and pick up victimize. This ensures that apprehended enemies are going to take more damage from you that scales with your fellowship bonus, which especially for Solomorne is going to be quite decent. But even for a regular main character, you probably want to put some points into fellowship to make your coercion even higher. Next, you get another common talent, and I will go ahead and pick up shotgun mastery. So this allows you to wield 2-handed shotguns in 1 hand, and the advantage of that is that you could dual wield shotguns if you wanted to. It also would allow you to use a 2-handed shotgun with a shield, which otherwise you would not be able to do. Now, I like this because by this point in the game, you're going to have a ton of action points and you're about to get even more. So you'll have enough action points to actually use a second shotgun attack, and it should work out very, very nicely. Also, keep in mind, again, he doesn't have a good way to reload, and you're getting to the point where some of these fights, you're gonna have to shoot that shotgun a ton of times, and being in a situation where you have to spend 3 action points sometimes in order to be able to reload your weapon is going to be very frustrating. Having a second weapon that you could just fire off instead definitely helps. All right, that's it for the overseer mechanics. So now let's get into Exemplar. Keep in mind, I do have a sheet linked in the description that walks through all of the talents and abilities that I've selected here. So if you need to see that listed out, it's available to you. For Exemplar talents, first one I want to take is Cataclysm. All damage dealt by this character is increased by 3% until the end of combat for every new enemy damaged by them this combat. Obviously, with a shotgun, you're going to be targeting a ton of people, so this amount is going to absolutely skyrocket. And now we're finally to the point that we can select soldier talents. So I would go ahead and start with Swift Slaughter, which allows Revelant Slaughter to be used after 2 kills instead of 3. And we can go back to increasing demolition, definitely do that. And then next up, you could select an overseer talent, but honestly, I think no heresy is more useful to you at this point. You're going to get a 10% bonus to critical hit chance and armor against Xenos and demonic creatures, which is going to be the vast majority of enemies you're facing by this point. But in addition to this, you're going to have to take a 0 rank in lore Xenos and lore warp. I think that's very consistent with who Solomorne is, and so there's no problem with that. I would pick this up. Next up, go back to increasing agility. And then for your next common talent, I would go ahead and pick up dual weapon combat, which is going to allow you to attack with the second weapon in your current weapon set. Now, that secondary attack is going to have a -20 penalty to weapon skill and ballistic skill, and is going to cost 1 action point more. So between managing your dog and your shotgun, previously, you didn't really have enough action points in order to be able to do this, but now you're just about getting to the point where there's going to be so many points you have available. This is a very viable option. Next up, you can pick another soldier ability, and no question, you want dash. Positioning is everything when you're using shotguns. There's going to be a lot of situations where just being able to move over 2 cells is really going to help you, and you could do this for free so it doesn't interrupt your action economy at all. Definitely you want to pick this up. And then for your next exemplar talent, I would go ahead and take Death Dealer. So this is going to trigger when you kill an enemy for the first time in a round, and it's going to allow you to immediately make another attack against the closest enemy for an attack that uses the least amount of action points. Now, the crazy thing about this for a shotgun wielder is that even your lowest AP attack is still one that attacks multiple enemies. And again, there will be some combat situations where you get an attack of opportunity right in the beginning before anybody else has the opportunity to act. So with this, you're going to fire into one group and then automatically fire into another group, potentially taking out 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 enemies right at the start of combat before anybody does anything. Bananas. Now, next up, you're back to overseer talents, and I would go ahead and pick up Chain Maw. This is going to trigger when the Cyber Mastiff is doing multiple hits against an apprehended enemy. It's going to cause those attacks to deal more damage that scales with its strength bonus, and this damage stacks. Now, it is reset if apprehend is used again, but if you're dealing with a difficult boss and you know you need that dog to attack it again and again and again, this is definitely going to come into play. Next, we're back to soldier talent, so I would go ahead and pick up enough bullets for everyone. The second attack during Solomorne's turn is going to deal additional damage that scales with his agility bonus when he's attacking enemies that have not suffered damage from him during this turn. And obviously, again, with shotguns, it's going to be extremely easy to go ahead and trigger this effect. Next, we get to choose another overseer ability, and I would pick up Bite. This allows you to choose an enemy in your line of sight who is within 5 cells of the dog, and it's going to cause the Cyber Mastiff to immediately dash to that enemy and then perform an attack that causes the target to suffer double rending damage, and it has to pass a toughness resistance test with a penalty that scales with the dog's weapon skill bonus, and if the enemy fails, they're going to fall prone for 1 round. So nice damage and some crowd control. Bite is definitely nice to have. After that, you've maxed out agility, so go ahead and move over to ballistic skill. And then next up, you want to take Stronger Together. This is going to cause your entire team, except for Xenos, to get a +5 bonus to the same characteristic as was used for Humanity's Finest, which in Solomorne's case was toughness. So this is going to make all of your party a little bit tougher. Now, next you have a common talent. I'd scroll all the way to the bottom and get Solid Projectile Weapon Expert. This is going to give you a +2 bonus to all the damage that your shotguns deal. Then after that, you've maxed out Demolition, so go ahead and move over to Coercion. And then you get another exemplar talent. I will go ahead and get Eager for Battle, which is going to give Solomorne a +2 bonus to action points during his first turn. Again, the first turn decides everything, so the more points you have, the absolute better. Speaking of which, next up you get an increase in action points. Now we're back to soldier talent, so I would take Tenderize. Enemies damaged by Solomorne's area attacks are going to suffer additional damage from the next attack that hits them that scales with his ballistic skill bonus. So all the way around, his area attacks are absolutely devastating. And then the very last suggestion I'll make is to go ahead and choose Unpredictable in the list of soldier talents. This is going to give him additional critical hit chance that scales with his agility bonus, and the bonus is going to be doubled when he's attacking enemies from which he is protected by cover. But obviously with Solomorne, that's just about never going to come into effect. So it's really the additional critical hit chance that is important. And you've already maxed out Demolition and Coercion, so you can honestly choose whatever you want. I think I went with Medikai so that eventually he could use Medikits, but it's completely up to you. Now, the last thing I wanted to cover is gear, because I'm sure some of you are curious about it. Keep in mind that the version of the game that I played had less Arbites related gear than the version of the game that you all are going to get. So it's very, very possible that there's way better stuff for this build that'll be available once you all get into your playthrough. With that being said, when it came to the head slot, I use a Swashbuckler's Goggles, which causes his shots in melee range to have a +20 bonus to dodge reduction, ensuring that enemies have to eat that lead. For the necklace, when he kills a target for the first time in a round, he's automatically going to get a +10 bonus to all characteristics until the end of the round. And of course, Solomorne killing an enemy during his turn to trigger this bonus is easy peasy. His armor is Voidsman armor, and it gives him a 65% bonus to armor, along with an additional 15% bonus against human enemies. But most importantly, it gives him a +15 bonus to perception. Of course, perception kind of got the short end of the stick compared to some of the other characteristics, so I like this buff here. Now, next up is Seal of the Purifier, and this is going to trigger when there are more than 2 targets that are damaged by Solomorne's area attack. It's going to give him additional momentum that scales with his resolve. So nice way to ensure he's doing heroic acts as quickly as possible. And then next up, demolition instructions are going to give him a massive bonus to demolition, and then on top of that, his area attacks are going to deal more damage that equals a 10th of demolition. So all the way around, double down on demolition being important. And then he has bracers that give him a +10 to ballistic skill and a +25% bonus to crit damage. Very nice. Now, the cape is going to trigger every time he kills an enemy, and is going to increase his critical hit chance by 5% until the end of combat. This number will quickly skyrocket when Solomorne gets through wiping out all those low-level enemies that are always in fights. And then next up is the Blitz Boots, and this allows him to get a +4 damage bonus against enemies who have no adjacent allies. Now, this only applies to the first strike or projectile and a burst attack, but he doesn't even have to worry about that since he's not doing burst attacks, so he's just going to get that bonus. Now, when it comes to the weapons, keep in mind he does have the shield. He automatically comes with a shield, and he automatically comes with the talent Shield Mastery, which ensures that when he uses a shield, it only takes 1 weapon set. Usually this would take up the secondary slot on both weapon sets, but because he has that talent, he doesn't have to worry about that. So I did just stick a regular shotgun in this slot just in case I wanted him using the shield sometimes to provide a little bit of extra protection. But when I'm going for the gusto, I use a second weapon set, and the primary shotgun, it is still just technically a regular shotgun, doesn't do anything special, just has really, really nice high damage. The second one is really cool. It has a doubled barreled shotgun, and as you can see, it's going to deal significantly more damage than this option. This option does 35 to 45 damage. The double barrel is going to do 70 to 100 damage, but the trade-off is it only has 1% armor penetration. So heavily armored enemies are going to be able to really shrug off what this shotgun does, whereas opposed to this one, they have to pay a little bit more attention. So I felt like this was a nice combo. And that's it. That is my full breakdown of my build for Solomorne. I had a great time with this build. He just easily walked through the vast majority of opposition that I encountered during the game. And so really, really excited to doing another full playthrough with this expansion out to see how much more I can get out of this build with all the additional items coming through. As always, if you all have any questions or need any clarification, leave me a comment down below. I'll be happy happy to answer you, and let me know if there's any particular content you want to see for the game moving forward. If you enjoyed this video, I definitely appreciate you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button if you haven't already. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.